Hi, this is Carol Pope.
Hi, I'm Kevin Staples.
And you're listening to Rainbow Country
with Mark Tara.
The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the persons appearing on the program.
Today on Rainbow Country, a spotlight on a new Canadian documentary about the rise, fall, and legacy of Canadian rock band Triumph. I'll be joined by filmmaker Sam Dunn from the award-winning production house Banger Films to get the inside scoop on this powerful new documentary, Triumph, Rock and Roll Machine. That and so much more in episode 273, so stay tuned for Gay Talk Radio right here on Rainbow Country.
Hello, my name is Conchita.
And I'm Barbecue.
And my name is Hardcora. And we are the Beat Girls.
You're listening to
Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Well, hello and welcome to a brand new journey through Rainbow Country. As I like to call it, a little gay radio show working to give voice to the LGBT community and beyond. And as always, I am your tour guide through Rainbow Country. I'm producer and host, Mark Tara. By the way, Rainbow Country originates from CIUT FM in Toronto, the sound of your city, and now proudly in syndication on 11 outlets across Canada. The newest station, CJLY-FM in Nelson, BC. So officially we can now say that Rainbow Country is heard coast to coast to coast. So whether you're listening in the Yukon, British Columbia, the Prairies, the east coast of Canada in the Maritimes, or Ontario, even down to Buffalo, New York, and of course, online. Thanks to you tuning in, streaming, downloading, but ultimately, listening. Together, we continue to build Rainbow Country into a nationally syndicated gay radio show, a #1 LGBT podcast, and a top 100 LGBT podcast to follow. So today, a spotlight on the new Canadian documentary, Triumph, Rock and Roll Machine, about the rise, the fall, and the legacy of this Canadian rock band. I'll be joined by filmmaker Sam Dunn from the award-winning production house Banger Films to get the inside scoop on this new Canadian documentary. Plus a flashback to my TIFF 2020 interview with award-winning filmmaker Francis Lee, director of the LGBT film Ammonite, starring Kate Winslet and Saoirse Ronan. And of course, music from LGBT artists, independent artists, voices that we've come to know and love in classic disco, classic 80s, classic house. And on this episode, I'm featuring a 3-song funk set, a 3-song new music set, and so much more. But up first, Rainbow Country contributor, activist, historian, and author Tim McCaskill talks about what led up to the 1981 Toronto Bathhouse raids.
If we think of the 1970s as the period where the gay community was trying to get noticed, the 1980s was the time when we actually got noticed and started getting seriously slammed. The cops had never been happy with Trudeau's 1969 decriminalization. If you look at historian Tom Hooper's work, you'll see that arrests of gay men actually increased across the country after decriminalization. Remember, this was way before apps. If you wanted to hook up, baths or bars were the best places to go, so those were the places that police targeted. And there were a series of bath and bar raids in Montreal and Toronto and Edmonton and Ottawa and other cities. The Toronto bath raids of February 5th, 1981 are the most famous. When Toronto's pro-gay mayor John Sewell and the first openly gay candidate for city council, George Hislop, were both defeated in the municipal elections in 1980, the cops figured we were vulnerable and swooped. They smashed into most of the city's gay baths, trashed the places, and arrested almost 300 men on a range of charges. It wasn't just the baths, they were also hassling the bars on concocted liquor license violations, and they were busting individuals in bookstores for porn. Basically, they were trying to shut down the gay village and recriminalize homosexuality. But that night when they hit the baths, they bit off more than they could chew. In Toronto, for the first time, the activists and the small business people and the normally non-political bar and bath patrons all came together in a series of massive demonstrations. We raised money to fight the charges in court and won. We made common cause with Black and South Asian communities who are also experiencing police brutality and harassment, and we demanded community control of the police. We called for changes to the criminal code to get rid of antiquated laws that still criminalized sex. That new community unity also laid the foundation for dealing with the next crisis that was about to affect us all, the AIDS epidemic. For Rainbow Country, this is Tim McCaskill, a gay liberation dinosaur from another planet and author of Queer Progress.
Bill 7, to ban discrimination in employment, government services, and housing, based on a person's sexual orientation, was up for a vote at Queen's Park. Most NDP and Liberal MPPs supported the bill, but without some progressive Conservative legislators backing, a divisive split could rack the province. 4 PCs decided to break party ranks to vote with their conscience and support Bill 7. Cabinet Minister and MPP Dennis Timbrell did it to show solidarity for his beloved brother, the well-known drag queen Rusty Ryan. And for me, a gay politician who was not yet out, I had to take a stand. We were known as the Gang of Four. I'm former Cabinet Minister and MPP Phil Gillies. The date, December 2nd, 1986, when LGBT rights came to Ontario.
Hi, I'm Saida Garrett, co-writer of Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mr. Mark Tara.
Up next, Triumph, Rock and Roll Machine.
Here's one of the groups that really believed in this event as we believe in them, Triumph.
Live rock and roll should be big and great and fantastic.
That's the element of rock and roll that keeps adolescent youth so gonzo about it.
That gathering of 14,000 people in a hockey rink is the epitome of what we do.
You guys are from Toronto, and they're blowing up.
Triumph! Triumph!
In the early 80s, Triumph were as big as Van Halen. They were as big as Motley Crue.
Triumph has never won.
As a rock fan, bands disappoint you, and Triumph never did that.
They were the good guys in an era that was meant for the dirtbags.
I was like, how are these guys not as big as Led Zeppelin? And then all of a sudden, that's it.
I broke their hearts, I know I did. There was a lot of guilt.
The fallout from that was horrible.
We went into a dark place for years.
With Triumph breaking up decades and decades ago, we were left missing something.
We hadn't played in a long time, but we'll see.
We've always felt this huge debt to our fans.
This is about the three of us having an integrity and closing a chapter for the band.
Remember we won these at the fair?
Oh, that's my old shirt, man.
I think I had the coolest one, though.
Well, let's start making them and see if we can sell them.
So bootleg their merch.
Yep.
and make some money.
Sam Dunn, hi, how are you?
I'm great, Mark. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for being here to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for that, especially when it comes to your current project, your new documentary, Triumph, Rock and Roll Machine. Mark Ricciardelli, I believe you say his last name, and yourself.
Ricciardelli, and I've butchered it many times, so I'm always sure to get it right now.
The two of you are the directors of this documentary. First of all, congratulations on getting a Canadian feature film made.
Thank you.
Triumph, Rock and Roll Machine. You've done a number of these documentaries in the past. Iron Maiden, I believe, ZZ Top, Tragically Hip. Talk to me about the process on how you guys decided on Triumph to be the subject of this new documentary.
Well, in the case of the Triumph film, it chose us rather than us choosing it, so to speak. We were actually approached by Don Allen of Revolver Films, who we've known over the years, and he'd actually, with the band's collaboration, gone out and raised the money to make the film. And he came to us because of our track record in producing music documentaries and asked us if we were interested in producing the film. And, you know, I knew enough about Triumph to know that, you know, there was a story to be told here, that they were legends of Canadian rock and beyond. And, you know, that there was a lot of gaps in I think, you know, the average viewer's knowledge about this band. So it seemed like a great opportunity that, well, put simply, we just couldn't turn it down.
Mm-hmm. They came to you.
Yeah, they came to us, which obviously doesn't always happen that way. I mean, every project comes together differently, but in this case, yeah, it was.
How does that make you feel then, knowing that these people, especially the band Triumph, they came to you to tell their story?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obviously an honor, and you know, we now, you know, my business partner Scott McFadgen and I, we've formed the company in 2004, and since then have been, you know, telling stories of hard rock bands and metal bands, and branched out into other genres of music. But you know, I guess it's nice to be in a place in our careers now where, you know, our track record and our credentials kind of speak for themselves, and we get offered these opportunities because people like the work we've done, and, you know, hopefully recognize the quality and care we always like to bring to these stories. And so, yeah, it's a better position to be in now than when we were scrambling and scratching as first-time filmmakers back in the early 2000s.
I'm sure. So Triumph Rock and Roll Machine was part of some special screenings at TIFF 2021. Have you guys been part of TIFF before with other features?
Yeah, a couple of times. In fact, our first film called Metal Headbanger's Journey, it premiered at Midnight Madness at TIFF 2005. Mm-hmm. And then fast forward to 16, I can't remember the exact year. We produced the Tragically Hip film, long time running. It was directed by Jen Bashwell and Nick DePontier, and that was a TIFF premiere as well. So yeah, Triumph was third time's a charm, I suppose.
And how's the response been to this new documentary?
Well, I mean, the response to that initial screening at TIFF was really great. We had a big drive-in screening down on the Lake Ontario, with 185 cars, and it was pretty much sold out, if not totally sold out. So it was a good crowd, especially given that we're in pandemic times and there's limited in-person screenings at TIFF this year. So that was great. And simultaneously next door at the Budweiser stage, we had a VIP invite-only screening for the band and for the Banger team and for friends of the band and the financiers and others who were involved in the film. About 200 of us watched it together, which was actually really great, really special to be able to do that. And also just given everything we've all been through in the last year and a half, just also great to be in a room with some people and watch a film. It was really fun.
Did you feel nervous at all being in a room with 200 other individuals watching a film during a global pandemic?
Not really. I mean, the event was really well set up. Live Nation, is a partner on this film, and Budweiser is a Live Nation venue, so it was really well organized. There was an indoor area and there was an outdoor area, and the indoor areas were kind of designated where the Banger team had one area, and then the band had another area, and et cetera. So I got to say that the event was really well organized, and I think it just was set up in a way that everyone could feel safe.
Well done. So in the film, you guys feature archival footage, as well as the band being interviewed, Gilmore, Mike Levine, Rick Emmett. When you were sourcing out material, archival footage for this documentary, did anything surprise you about the band, like maybe some past history or something along that line that surprised you? Anything along that line come about for you while researching Triumph?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is actually the degree to which Gilmore is a quintessential pack rat. And as we show in the film, there's this attic at Meadowlark Studios, which Gil has been running since I guess the late 70s, early 80s, where we didn't know until we got started that he's been collecting all of this Triumph material. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily archive material per se in the sort of footage sense, but it's actually a huge visual resource. He kept t-shirts and old 7-inches and tour brochures,
memorabilia.
For those who are old enough to know what those are, and just sort of endless amounts of, Triumph ephemera that ended up being, kind of a goldmine for us in terms of just being able to use that stuff to scan and to present into the film. So that was something that we didn't know existed until we got started.
So, Funkus, Burn to Black, Dementia, Scrape Chamber. These are some of the bands that you have been part of because you are a musician, you are a bass player. When did you discover your love for music, especially as a musician?
Okay, first of all, I'm super impressed that you had that list of bands. Kudos to you. You've done your research. All the other bands I've been in, so my love of music, goes way back to my parents were very musical people. We always had music playing in the house. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to think, I'm pretty lucky because they had good taste. It was everything from, the Beatles to Bob Marley to Santana to a lot of classical music, some folk music, and on and on and on. So grew up in a musical household. Both my parents played music as hobbies. And, I started listening to music at a young age and then got really into heavy metal as a preteen and got into playing the bass when I was 12 and on it goes. So I guess the short answer is that, music was there in the DNA, literally and figuratively, mm-hmm. from a very young age. And it's just stuck with me all these years, either as a musician, but more so now as as a documentary producer and director who, loves to produce stories about great music and great artists.
Do you still play?
Not as much as I'd like to be honest with you. The basses spend more time hanging on the wall than I play, but my son, who's now 9, is taking up the drums. So I channel all my musical energy through him. And occasionally we get together and we jam on some riffs, which is a lot of fun.
So you have a bachelor's degree in anthropology?
Yeah.
From the University, I believe, of Victoria. A master's from York University?
This is all correct.
Okay, so how does a musician with a bachelor and a master's end up becoming a Peabody award-winning filmmaker? How did you discover your love for filmmaking? Because you started out as a musician in bands. Mm-hmm. When did you get introduced to filmmaking? At what point?
Yeah, well, I studied anthropology through to, graduate level, and I've always been fascinated with music. And it was actually towards the end of finishing my master's degree, I got obsessed with this idea that someone needed to write a good history on metal music. This would have been sort of late 90s. And at that time, I didn't feel like there was really something sort of comprehensive and of quality that had been written. And, my friend and someone I'd been involved in the music industry with, Scott, who's now my business partner, we got to talking about that. And he was working in film. He worked as a music supervisor and had started working as an assistant director on set. And he, as I recall, just kind of turned to me one day and said, well, what about a documentary on metal? Has there ever been anything made? And, he was looking to make that turn into directing and producing films. And we dove into the research and discovered that, nothing had really been done on metal in a way that we felt was kind of like digging into the music and the culture and why people love it, why people fear it, why it's caused so much controversy over the years. So, the shorter answer to your question is, I didn't really grow up dreaming to make films. It was just sort of, there was a combined passion for music and being fascinated with cultures around the world through my studies with anthropology. And then just as time progressed, just found an opportunity, I guess, to put those interests on screen as opposed to writing books or writing magazine articles or academic articles about them. So it was really through my friendship and relationship with Scott that pivot into filmmaking happened.
Has your background in anthropology helped you in your filmmaking endeavors, do you think?
Well, with the first film, we made it kind of part of the story because that was my background, and I'm on screen in the first film, Headbanger's Journey. So we turned it into the story of, a one part metal fan, one part anthropologist on a journey to understand this, really the story of heavy metal and its cultural impact. But as time has gone on, spend less time in front of the camera, but I suppose the anthropology informs our work in the sense that I think that anthropology just really puts you in a mind frame that is at its core exploratory, inquisitive, tries to understand all cultures in the broadest sense of the term on their own terms. And, it is kind of the practice of putting yourself in other people's shoes. I think there's a parallel between anthropology and documentary filmmaking in that sense. So I suppose there's a synergy there. You could make an argument that almost all documentary filmmaking is anthropology in some form or another, I suppose, because anthropology is so broad. But I think it's a shared fascination with trying to understand the human condition that, both documentary filmmaking and anthropology share.
In the early 80s, Triumph were as big as Van Halen. They were as big as Motley Crue.
Triumph has never won.
As a rock fan, bands disappoint you, and Triumph never did that.
They were the good guys in an era that was meant for the dirtbags.
I was like, how are these guys not as big as Led Zeppelin? And then all of a sudden, that's it.
And on that note, we will return after this Rainbow Country update.
Hi, I'm writer Adam Smith, author of Deep Sniff, A History of Poppers and Queer Futures. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Canada's LGBTQ2+ archives, just released Out North, an archive of queer activism and kinship in Canada. Order a copy from your local bookstore to dive into hundreds of loud and proud stories and photos of historical queer life in Canada from pre-1939 to today. Get your copy from your local bookstore. Out North, an archive of queer activism and kinship in Canada.
Hi, I'm Keegan Hurst, former professional rugby player, coach, raving homosexual, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
So from metal to pop to hip hop, Banger Films covers all musical genres. You started this Toronto-based company, like you were saying, Banger Films, with your business partner, Scott McFadden. Banger TV on YouTube has over 43 million views on YouTube. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
Some of the awards that you guys have won include an Emmy Award, a Peabody Award, Juno Award, in 2020, a Grammy nomination. And you were saying in 2004, you guys started Banger Films. Mm-hmm. When you started this company, Banger Films, in 2004, did you think it would become the award-winning production house that it has become in 2021? Did you have those thoughts at all? Like, I'm going to be part of this, I'm going to start this, and I'm going to win some awards, including a Peabody?
No, is the honest answer. I think that when we started, in the earlier days, we really worked from one film to the next in the sense that, it took us 5 years to raise the financing and produce our first film. And we were fortunate because it was successful. It premiered at TIFF, as I mentioned earlier, and it got bought by dozens of countries around the world and ended up being kind of I don't know, dare I say, a kind of a landmark film in telling the story of metal, and really kicked down a lot of doors. And so from there, we started to produce films on a lot of the bands that were in our first film because they really enjoyed our work and appreciated that we, told the story of metal in a respectful manner. So our films on Rush and Alice Cooper and Iron Maiden, those three in particular, were really kind of direct outgrowths of that very first film. And then, there came a time sort of in the early 20-teens when we started to talk about doing series. And that's when we had to think more about, our work from a business standpoint and running a company and having a staff and all of those, signs of maturity, and actually started to really look at it more from a company perspective rather than solely a creative perspective. So it was really a process of growing from wanting to make one great film and then wanting to make a number of films, and then into really doing full-blown series work and learning to run a company.
So what's coming up next for this documentary, Triumph Rock and Roll Machine? You guys are doing, I guess, the festival circuit?
Yeah, well, there will be some festival appearances throughout the fall and early winter. The current plan is that in Canada, it will be airing on Crave, probably early 2022. And, right now we're using the festival circuit to sell the film outside of Canada, which is really our main focus right now. So looking to obviously get the film on as big a platform as possible, so as many viewers can watch the Triumph story.
And so what's next for you and Banger Films?
Yeah,
over and above the Triumph documentary?
Yeah, we're really, in development and hustle mode right now. We do have one show we've just finished production on, which is actually a kids show. We've done a handful of kids shows in the past under our kids division moniker called B Minors. We haven't done much kids stuff in recent years, but we've got a series coming up with the CBC we're excited about. And then really beyond that, we are close to green lights on a couple of series that we're working hard on, and a feature documentary about a music artist that we're absolutely thrilled about, but can't disclose the name on yet. But
are they Canadian?
Yeah, so yes and no.
Okay.
Is because it's it's a bit of a combo there, but yeah, we are. It's a boring answer to a good question, but we're deep in development and hustle mode right now.
Well done. Another film that was part of TIFF 2021 was a documentary on Alanis Morissette called Jagged. Did you happen to see that at all?
I haven't seen it, no, but I've seen some of the press on it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some controversy now around Alanis's take on the documentary, that she thought that it's not something she can endorse, even though I've seen the film and it's a great documentary chronicling, her time back then. And it's interesting now that, this has happened. So
yeah, I haven't seen the documentary. I'd love to. I'd love to learn about Alanis's journey, and the story in her life and around that huge album. But yeah,
because the filmmaker, they lived with her, because this was during, the lockdown, the pandemic, like in, the main part of it, and they lived together for weeks. So the fact that Alanis Morissette is now saying that she felt, betrayed and it's interesting. Yeah,
well, I mean, I don't know the film, I don't know the filmmaker, and I don't know Alanis, but I mean, when I read the press on it, it certainly resonated with me in the sense that, we've done a number of these films that dig deep into these artists' stories, and from my standpoint, it's work to establish that trust. And I guess maybe we've been fortunate enough that, with the films we've made, the artists have been pleased with what we've created, and we've been aligned. I mean, not to get into the weeds, but there's always cases where there's parts of films which I wish we could have kept in, and maybe through the process of that dialogue with the artist, that there's a bit of give and take, and I think that's probably inevitable. But I think that's part of our, we work closely with the artist. In our case at Banger, it's always a dialogue. So. But so when I read that stuff about the Alanis film, I felt actually for both Alanis and the filmmaker, because I know how challenging that relationship can be.
I'm curious. Do you know the group? Well, you'd obviously know the group Metallica.
Yeah.
But do you know a gentleman by the name of Michael Anthony Alago?
Yeah.
Do you know him?
Well,
or you know of him?
We did a series. The first series we produced was called Metal Evolution, and it was an 11-part series on the history of heavy metal. We did back in 2011, I think. And I actually went to Michael's apartment and interviewed him, and he's in that series.
Nice. Yeah. He's been on the show.
That's great. Yeah. And there was a film made about him.
Yes.
Correct?
Who the fuck is that guy?
Yeah. I actually haven't seen the film, unfortunately. I need to see that. But I haven't seen Michael in a long time, but certainly met him when we were making that series and was, keenly aware of his role in that very early part of Metallica's career.
Yeah, he signed them to their first major label deal.
I know, and that's the story we tell in our series. Yeah. So that, a
little
amazing.
Gay guy too. I don't know if you knew that about him, but
yeah, I know, I knew that.
Yeah,
I knew that. Yeah. No, he's great. He's great. So much energy. I mean, that's what I remember about Michael. Just like a fireball. Yeah, great guy.
Sam Dunn, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being on the show. Well said, well done, well made on Triumph Rock and Roll Machine.
Thanks, Mark. That was a great interview. Pleasure to meet you, and thanks for having me.
Here's one of the groups that really believed in this event as we believe in them, Triumph.
Live rock and roll should be big and great and fantastic.
That's the element of rock and roll that keeps adolescent youth so gonzo about it.
That gathering of 14,000 people in a hockey rink is the epitome of what we do.
These guys are from Toronto, and they're blowing up.
Triumph.
In the early 80s, Triumph was as big as Van Halen. They were as big as Motley Crue.
Triumph has never won.
As a rock fan, bands disappoint you, and Triumph never did that.
They were the good guys in an era that was meant for the dirtbags.
I was like, how are these guys not as big as Led Zeppelin? And then all of a sudden, that's it.
I broke their hearts. I know I did. There was a lot of guilt.
The fallout from that was horrible.
We went into a dark place for years.
With Triumph breaking up decades and decades ago, we were left missing something.
We hadn't played in a long time, but we'll see.
We've always felt this huge debt to our fans.
This is about the three of us having an integrity and closing a chapter for the band.
Remember we won these at the fair?
Oh, that's my old shirt, man.
I think I had the coolest one, though.
Well, let's start making them and see if we can sell them.
So bootleg their merch.
Yep.
And make some money.
To keep up to date on this new documentary, or to find out more about this award-winning production house, simply visit bangerfilms.com.
Hi, this is Michael Anthony Alago, music executive, photographer, author, and you are listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
He is the award-winning filmmaker that brought us the powerful 2017 LGBT film, God's Own Country. In 2020, during TIFF, I had the pleasure to have a quick interview with this award-winning filmmaker to talk about his most recent film, starring Kate Winslet and Saoirse Ronan, Ammonite. Up next, Francis Lee. Hi.
Hi, Mark. Hi. You sound like you're in like a wonderful soundproof recording studio.
Ooh, girl, you know I am. I'm in the closet.
Well, if you're happy being in there, I would never want to out anybody.
Okay. So let us start.
It was a sea lizard, 6 feet long. Days it took to dig it out. Clean it. I was only 11 years old. It's in the British Museum. That one was special.
Miss Annie. I've often heard your reputation discussed in the Geographical Society in London.
Is there something you wanted, sir?
My wife, she hasn't been at all well of late. She suffers from melancholia. I want her to walk the shoreline with you, learn from you.
I'm not looking for an apprentice.
I would pay a premium for a private audience.
It's not easy work.
Don't like the water. What is it?
Cheap tourist fodder.
Beautiful.
It pleases me you've struck up a friendship together.
What is it? Something? Nothing? I don't want to go back to the life I had before you. What about my life?
Francis Lee, hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for being here to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond, especially when it comes to your current film, Ammonite. My first question for you, Mr. Lee, is simply this. How did the internet, an ex-lover, polished stones lead you to eventually writing and directing Ammonite? Basically, what sparked this film?
It was actually discovering Mary Anning by pure accident and reading about her. And I was instantly struck by her circumstances. You know, here was this woman born into a life of poverty, very working class, no access to education at all, in this patriarchal, class-ridden society, you know, and through her own ingenuity, her own self-possession and determination and this will to survive, rose to being, I guess, what we would now call one of the leading paleontologists of her generation. And there just seemed to be a little parallel there somewhere for me. You know, somebody who grew up in very rural northern Britain, you know, to a working class family, not a great education. I knew in my heart of hearts I wanted to write and direct, but just didn't see how I could get access to what looked like such a privileged profession. And there were just those kind of nuances that really stuck with me. And at the same time, I was doing quite a lot of reading about same-sex relationships in the 18th and 19th century. And I came across this paper by Carol Smith Rosenberg that so eloquently described female and female relationships within this period as documented by letters that they wrote to each other. And there were described these wonderful, lifelong, passionate, caring relationships between women. And those two things, you know, Mary Anning and this idea of what female and female sexuality looked like in this period collided. And that's how I kind of the starting point for Ammonite.
You are the writer of this film. You are the director of this film. Francis Lee, for you, Ammonite is a film about what?
Gosh, I think for me, if I'm honest, it's about loneliness and it's about loss, but it's also about hope. And it's about the power of being an individual, but how a relationship, somebody else, can add growth and experience to yourself and to make your life better.
So an actor that's in Ammonite is Alec
Sekaranu.
And he plays the doctor. He also stars in your first film, God's Own Country. Personally, as a gay person, God's Own Country, love it. Fantastic movie.
Thank you.
I'm interested to know why you chose to tell this story of Ammonite following God's Own Country. Why tell this story now?
To me, it felt like, well, first of all, I love writing, exploring, thinking about intimate human relationships. And I, all my films are very, very personal. I'm exploring very personal issues, I guess, through them and emotions. And at this time, I was, again, thinking about deep human, intimate relationships and how you navigate them. And it just felt like the right space. And also, I kind of still feel we live in a patriarchal, class-ridden society. And I still feel that voices are overlooked and ignored. And because of, their gender or their race or their sexual orientation or how they identify. And here was a real, trailblazer, really, whose voice had gone unheard for so long that I felt really added a parallel to what we're still dealing with today. Personally, as a queer working class man from, as I say, rural Britain, I still very much feel personally the effects of the class system and of patriarchy.
Gemma Jones plays the mother in the movie. The figurines in the film. How did you come up with that idea, that concept of the figurines in Ammonite?
So again, looking at loss and what Molly Anning, Mary's mother, had lost. She'd lost 8 children in childbirth. And I was trying to think of a way in which something might symbolize that loss. And, I come from a family who likes lots of ornaments and, likes to fill their houses with what they might call their pretties, ceramic things. And I just thought that maybe she would have, transferred her sense of loss or her sense of care or love onto an inanimate object that she could care for and keep safe. And that's how they came up. And also those little figurines were very commonplace in this period.
So can we talk about sex?
Of course.
So Ammonite stars Oscar winner Kate Winslet, Golden Globe winner Saoirse Ronan, and they have quite the sex scene, an explicit sex scene. It's so well done. I'm interested to know, did you have any pushback from your actors in doing that particular scene, or were they just all in?
I mean, for me, those intimate scenes, it always starts in the script, and it comes down to the fact that I like visual storytelling. I like telling stories with pictures, not words. So a lot of, in the 2 films I've made, characters don't sit around and tell you how they feel for various reasons. And so I have to tell those stories visually with the pictures. And so if it feels like an intimate scene will tell us something about those characters, where they are at, and if that scene moves the story along, tells us about their relationship, that dynamic, then that's how I justify writing them and putting them in. And then when it comes to working with actors, if hopefully I've done my work properly, and the scene in the script doesn't jump out and actors go, why have you written this? And they go, oh, that's really interesting because, they're feeling like this and they communicate like this and then they do this. And actors, generally are very excited to do those scenes because it's about storytelling. And both Kate and Saoirse You know, we worked very, very closely. And I, as a director, I pride myself, or I push myself to be there for the actors and create the safest environment I can for them to do their very, very best. So we already had a really, really good, trustful relationship by the time we were coming to do those scenes. And then it just became a conversation about how we do it, what would make them comfortable. And I think they both really enjoyed doing them.
I made a small film called God's Own Country. Nobody commissioned me, just a story I needed to tell, tiny budget. Now the biggest critical box office hit by a UK debut filmmaker, 2017, and nominated for a BAFTA Outstanding British Film. How do you feel making history?
You know, when you tweet something, it will always come back and haunt you.
It's fantastic.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. How do I feel? I feel, you know, I have to be very honest with you. The whole experience of making film, I didn't make God's Own Country until I was 47, I don't think. You know, I didn't go to film school. I had no education, really. And what happened to that film and to me, and what has happened to Ammonite and me now, consequently, is a huge, huge surprise and often really overwhelming. You know, I live very quietly. I live in a wooden hut on the side of a hill in Yorkshire, in the middle of nowhere. You know, I tend to try and steer clear of parties and what have you. But the whole experience has been incredibly special, particularly when you meet people who've seen God's Own Country and Ammonite, and it's meant something to them. And it's, you know, it's reflected them on screen, or an emotion that they've had. And they, you know, and they might feel seen and heard. And that to me is an incredible privilege to be in that position.
Francis Lee, I have to say thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your sharing your talent and your visions in both those films. So well done. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Have a lovely day and a lovely time in the closet.
I will. Thank you.
It was a sea lizard. 6 feet long. Days it took to dig it out, clean it. I was only 11 years old. It's in the British Museum. That one was special.
Miss Annie. I've often heard your reputation discussed in the Geographical Society in London.
Is there something you wanted, sir?
My wife, she hasn't been at all well of late. She suffers from melancholia. I want her to walk the shoreline with you, learn from you.
I'm not looking for an apprentice.
I would pay a premium for a private audience.
It's not easy work.
Don't like the water. What is it?
Cheap tourist fodder.
Beautiful.
It pleases me you struck up a friendship together.
What is it? Something? Nothing?
I don't want to go back to the life I had before you. What about my life?
For more on this award-winning filmmaker, you can find him on Twitter. Just search Francis Lee.
Hi, I'm Cameron Bailey, Artistic Director and Co-Head of TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Hi, my name is Joanne Vanicola, and I'm an actor and a writer, and I was first on Rainbow Country with Mark Tara on discussing the massacre at Pulse Club in Orlando. I realized how important it was for our community to have a radio station, specifically for our issues, to talk about people in the LGBTQ community and to provide an outlet for our stories, to discuss our politics, culture, and give voice to the issues that matter to us, and of course our artists and the things that we do globally, and talk about culture. And without people like Mark Tara providing a space for this with a radio show like this, then we wouldn't have that voice. So support, tune in. Thank you.
Hi, this is Police Constable Danielle Botno, also known as LGBT Cop, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
And just like that, this little gay journey through Rainbow Country has come to an end. For the full 2-hour episode, just head over to marktara.com, where everything is connected, and hit the archives banner. To keep up to date with the show, follow me on socials at Mark Tara Music. The podcast is available on all major platforms, including audible.com. And finally, I want to take this time to thank you for taking your time to be with me. Remember, stay well, stay strong, and stay safe.